Hey everybody, welcome back to the Spill Rack. Hey, I'm here with PD and Professor CA. Say what's up, guys.
What up?
What's going on?
Hey, we're looking right here at this controversial statements made by Quentin Tarantino regarding the whole Bruce Lee subject, and his daughter responded to some of that. So hey, PD and Professor CA, can one of you guys start this thing off?
CA, it's on you.
All right. So basically, just minding my own business, listen to the Joe Rogan podcast. I love long form like joints like that. I can sit there and watch it, listen to like a 2 hour, 3 hour thing, or just like take a walk and do it anyway. So hearing the stories, all things we already know about, he's going to retire his 10th movie. Of course, it gets brought up about the his last movie, the Hollywood joint, and then of course it gets mentioned his take on on Bruce Lee and that fight. And then it's pretty much what you already heard, right? And then
All right.
and I think the clip that got really picked up on was him saying, "Well, you know what? If I can understand Shannon Lee having a problem, that's her father. Everybody else can go, blah blah blah."
Right.
Right? So that's the clip we heard. But now when I'm listening to the actual long form podcast, he goes off on this whole tangent down a total rabbit hole, like kind of like calling out the mother, the wife of Bruce Lee as a liar, and also throwing shade and kind of throwing doubt about a lot of stuff that was said in the book that she did about her husband and his life, and a lot of stuff that we already thought was true that was laid out in other movies in terms of the idea for kung fu being taken from Bruce. But he seems Quentin's like telling a whole other version of that story and going really kind of hard and kind of mean at Bruce's wife and mentioning some things I don't think needed to be mentioned. So yes, that's basically where it's at. So I don't think many people know about the whole other rabbit hole comments he was making. So I think that's what we were trying to look at getting into today.
My question is, why is he going so hard? I mean, what is it that is there something he's trying to defend and he's coming back hard on it? Is there something he has to push back on, or is he developing a project and he doesn't want it to be claimed by Bruce Lee? You know,
But I think it was more like from the actual interview. Um, it's like Joe kind of was like, well, can you just mention a little bit about the, once a time before Hollywood and the Bruce piece? And Joe, you can tell Joe didn't want to. Obviously, Joe's trying to get as much dirt or fun content that he can, but he knows he has so much respect for Quentin. He's like, look, do you mind if you just mention this? They talk about that, but somehow that just got Quentin inspired to go further. So Joe got a lot more stuff than he was expecting, and Joe, I believe, had Shannon Lee on his show before.
get out.
I'm pretty sure that happened. And I think Joe, as a fight enthusiast and martial artist within his own right, I think he was a fan of Bruce. So it just went down a whole
Aren't
other.
we all?
Yeah, for sure.
Now, before we play anything, I would just ask you, Professor, are you feeling that Quentin is being, is he's being right, or he's just trying to sort of sling mud, and it's just her, his word, one book versus that, or which side are you going towards? Before I
Right.
like jump on and say, because we already lost it in a couple of videos, so I wanted you to, have you have any other feelings about it? Let us know.
Um, I can't wait. I'm sure if we do if since we're doing this now, I'm sure Cal's gonna have a take on it, a hot take on this for sure. So I'm sure that'll be a thing. It might be a part two on this. I don't know.
Yeah.
But from my take, I nothing that he said was anything that I could be like, I don't know enough to know whether or not he was right or true. It was enough to kind of spark my curiosity that I will sit down and do more digging as a result of what he's saying, because it does run contrary to kind of the narratives that I was aware of. So what I can't speak to is truth or non-truth, but Quentin was extremely confident to enough to call Bruce Lee's wife a liar.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I probably and I haven't heard the whole thing. I heard parts of it. Probably he is, the wife is definitely going to have a particular narrative of whatever the story is, with
Right.
her husband, and it's only typical, especially in some of the things Bruce Lee was doing. But there's been a lot written throughout the years about what Bruce Lee was doing. Is controversial. What he was doing in Asia, what he was doing with or without her, and stuff like that. So it's not something that's going to be totally a gigantic change. You know, the spouse is always going to have you. When you do a biography, you have different points of view. You know, one person, the person is an angel, another person is a devil, and of course, people have their points of view and things they're vested in staging. But after all these years, why is he? It's just bringing up all this stuff. Like you're like, why are you even bringing this? You know, why are you even fighting with this stuff? That's
Well,
my
I
twist.
would I
And it's
would agree with what you're saying is that if this guy is someone you dislike this much, why is he in the film?
yeah, I
You
mean, in Kill Bill, I mean, the presence of Bruce Lee can be felt from the
How can you
uniform.
say that though? He
Huh?
stole Bruce Lee's look, and then he gave the like you he's stealing Bruce. It's not it's not an homage. It's taking taking Bruce's look and putting it on the person he thinks should be the real deal, the you know the protege of David Carradine. It's a clear line of saying, hey, David Carradine's the guy. He was in Kung Fu. He's the guy the actors the studio chose, and not Bruce, because David Carradine was better, and that's why we got it. Whereas if Bruce was in Kung Fu, it would be still played like it's still being played, but it's not as prevalent as something where you see stuff like, Happy Days and stuff like that. And that's one of the hard things because you're looking at it, it's like it's an eyesore because it's a white dude playing the Asian guy. It's always going to be an eyesore, and that's one of the things I think he's. I mean, we'll get to playing, but I just think I can't respect I hear what you feel, and a lot of people who like Bruce, but then you constantly hear kung fu, and then you see, I don't like that sort of homage because people aren't going to go back and think Bruce, and then he's trashing Bruce. So then you're like,
Hold on a second, Pete. What do you mean? I mean, I thought that the whole thing is that we all know that Bruce started the whole idea of what Kung Fu would become, the show Kung Fu, and they chose not to have him. And,
well,
it was not a story, and then they took that story and they placed Carradine in it. Are you
that's
telling
what,
me that's not correct?
that's what he's saying. That's why I felt that there was a thread where he was going kung fu versus Bruce Lee, and it seems like that's in my mind. He doesn't directly say that, but let's let it play now.
It's ridiculous. Are you serious? What is it? He doesn't want to pay. Look, by depicting a character who looks like Bruce Lee in this film, is he trying not to? Do you have to pay the Bruce Lee family royalties or something? Because
I think he's taking a direct shot at, like, yes, the portrayal, one, Dragon, that movie Dragon,
right.
and the book, which has it laid out that they were courting Bruce for projects they could work on together. He came up with Kung Fu, and then they went ahead with David Carradine. It's the way kind of like the narrative is played out in the movie and in the
Okay.
book. So let's see what Quentin is saying now.
All right, cool.
Too, right?
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't?
That's part
Is
of
that
the
bullshit?
Yeah, it's a complete lie.
Really?
All right. Yeah, I mean, it's like Linda Lee just as completely lied about that in that book she wrote, Bruce Lee, The Man Only I Knew. The Man Only She Knew. Well, Betty T. Ping, the mistress, who he's Betty died in, probably knew him a little bit too. And, I mean, Bruce Lee died in his mistress's bed.
Yeah, what did he die from? It was like a complications from a medication?
Something, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and but she wrote this book called Bruce Lee, The Man Only I Knew, which was actually the first biography I ever read. And in the book, she claims that Bruce had written this idea for a TV show called The Warrior, and that Warner Brothers read The Warrior and ripped it off. And then they wrote Kung Fu. And then they read Bruce Lee, but decided not to use him because they're racist. And then boom, they cast David Carradine. Okay, Kung Fu was written by a guy named, I believe his name is David Abramson. Abrams or Abramson. Ed Abramson. I might be pronouncing it wrong, but it's a name like that. Okay, well, this is pretty fucking clear. Ed Abramson either ripped off Bruce Lee's treatment for the Warrior, or he didn't. Ed Abramson, either who was an established TV writer, he also wrote the movie Gordon's War that Ossie Davis directed. He either created Kwai Chang Caine or Bruce Lee did. He's either is guilty of plagiarism or he's not. Well, he's not. He created. He never saw this Warrior thing. He created, and he has I talked to the author of the book about Bruce Lee, Matthew Polly. You know, he said, "Oh man, when I called Ed Abrams up, oh my God, it was the phone call he'd been waiting 40 years for because he's had to put up with this all this time. He had all the information, he had all the documentation of how he wrote the script and how he came up with Kwai Chang Caine. He wrote that script. He created Kwai Chang Caine. All right, now, okay, so let's also look at it from a different point of view. Okay, so maybe Ed Abramson didn't rip off the Warrior. Okay, but maybe, say, Warner Brothers did. Say, Warner Brothers, hey, this is a great idea. Okay, so this is written, so again, imagine Warner Brothers saying this. Okay, so this is written by like the greatest martial artist guy of all time. Let's get rid of him. First thing off the bat, let's get rid of him. We don't want him involved. Why would we want him involved? Let's get rid of him. And now we'll just hire some guy, but we won't tell him that it's based on this guy's treatment called The Warrior. We won't tell him that.
Now, I'm pausing here. None of that means anything right there. Not the stuff before, whether the opinion of the writer or this, that, and the other. This part where he's saying, telling the actors show up for anything. You have white people showing up for black roles. They don't sit around there telling you, well, the history of it is this, that, and the other. Some of the stuff that he's bringing in to validate his point is jumping away from the point of saying, hey, let's get to the evidence of this writer. Now, the thing of it is having it around the same time, whether it is, that's the question, as he said, either you believe one or believe the other. So that would lead to another thing, which would be more of casting. So if you are believing that this guy wrote it first, even though you could have written this thing at any time, but right around the time Bruce is around, there's always this thing of like, no, I came up with it first. The same RKO has a patent for the television before the creator of the television. And he like sued and won against these phony patents for the television. This saying that you have proof and all this other stuff is, in Hollywood, what's the name? Scary Movie got jacked. Stuff gets jacked. And the other thing is that I think his next point is that, to lead into it, that, well, why would you work with someone if they jacked what you just did? And that's the business. The business isn't to you get jacked, you don't work for them no more. The business is you get jacked and you still make deals with the same people. Like it's reverse of what they say. It's the people you meet on the top are the same people you meet on the bottom. No, when you're on the bottom, the same people that trash you, steal all your ideas to the bottom are the same ones you make the deals with on the top.
Yep.
That's the thing you have to remember. So it's like someone who, there's tons of people. Bert Kreischer, who his idea was almost bought by, was made into a Ryan Reynolds movie, Van Wilder. Like that's the story of this comedian Bert Kreischer's life. And he's like, we're going to sue. And his manager said, are you in the suing business or you're in the entertainment business? Because there's two. You can't do both. Either you sit in court and don't work, or you play, you move on to the next idea. And he moved on to the next idea because your ideas get stolen all the time. So this thing, if you can believe, the audience can believe what they want to believe,
right?
But like this idea, and it may be some grounds, but then we have to get the casting, and that's going to come up. And I don't want to get into this next thing about him not working. He would decide not to. If they're the people making the deals with him, who are you going to make the deal with? You're going to be you take the money. That's what it is. So, unless anyone else has something to chime in. Sorry.
Yeah, first of all, I think he got the name wrong. From what I read, it's that his name was Edward Spielman, right? That's the guy that they
so not Abramson.
Abramson. So if you're coming here trying to spout facts about what this story is supposed to be, and he's talking about something totally well. He supposedly knows this very well, but yeah, he's naming the wrong guy. That who claims that he started this in '67. It also seems to be funny that the same guy that Bruce was also working with. Bruce also went for the audition for the role. In '71, he also said that, and his wife says it in the book, and he also had an interview, said that, he had an idea for the story, and, they didn't think that he would be the one, the right face for it. So I don't know if this was before the audition or after the audition. So there's a lot of murkiness in there, but, it just seems that he was really the one for the role right then and there. So, and they decided to go with Carradine. Like you said, Hollywood is a funny place in that you have many different ideas floating around, and it's very possible that this guy could have had an idea too. Was it being moved? Was it being shot or whatever? And at the same time, he had an idea and he was pushing it forward. And they said, hey, you know what? Let's go with this idea better than the other. It's the same thing. It's just we got someone else. Probably don't have to pay him or whatever. So I mean, it's or pay him less. And Bruce Lee also was doing, when this whole thing was rocking together, he was doing a movie. And when that hit, he was like, yeah, I'm going to just do the movie business instead of worrying myself about this star stuff, because they had already turned him down for the audition. So, but they held him on, though, because they wanted to make sure. I think they gave him some type of money because they wanted to hold on to him to make sure he didn't go out somewhere. But so it's
all that explains this stuff where he's going to get into the, hey, if someone stole your idea, would you work with them? Well, that's Hollywood.
Exactly.
Yep.
Comedians, they say that TV writers go to the comedy shows, and next those things will become episodes. They say that SNL, like whenever computers were on there, I think who's that guy? They said who's the writer was working on a computer, and he said, well, we just saw that you got an idea that we're already writing, so you should stop what you're writing because we got something similar. And it's like that sort of thing where you pitch something and then someone says, oh, no, that's mine. They're like, no, I pitched that like 3 weeks ago. Now it's the same thing. So it's like this Hollywood thing of this guy made it and there's no chance and I have my records of this. And it's just like, yeah, but at the same time, there's more of a chance of it. And that's more my opinion. But at the same time, it's not the first time something like that would have happened. But like I would say, let's go to the casting now, because this other thing he's going to talk about is, like
but Hollywood has so many. They get pitched so many ideas, and there's so many ideas that they buy and hold on to that they don't even have. I mean, we've heard of all these writers and people who've put in screenplays, full screenplays, which they paid for, and they just shelved it. And all of a sudden, there's a disaster movie, and like, hey, do we have a disaster movie? I think that's the thing that's in. Or hey, there's a pandemic. Hey, do we have a pandemic movie? Such and such pandemic movie did well. Let's do something similar. Or someone did a Western. Hey, do we have anything? And so you're like, oh, hey, we need to have certain elements. This element worked in this film, or whatever. We think it's a good idea. Or we like this movie, but we don't think this guy is going to sell the movie.
And that's the thing.
This guy will be able to do it. We talked about this earlier with Independence Day, where the studio was fighting back against Roland Emmerich, the director, who was like, no, we don't want Bruce. I'm not Bruce. We don't want Will Smith as the lead for this film. And he felt like, hey, it shouldn't matter. They're aliens. They're fighting aliens. We're all, and it turned out to be a good choice. But it's interesting. So yeah, continue.
Well, if they did that, and then the show becomes the phenomena, it becomes not just a hit, phenomena, like the biggest show of its era, like that and All in the Family. Well, I was the Lee family, I'd be kind of mad at Warner Brothers, wouldn't you? To rip me off so bad?
Yes.
Okay, well, naturally. Okay, but when Bruce Lee is sitting in the catbird seat and he does his first studio film, Enter the Dragon, who does he do it with? Warner Brothers.
Right, but maybe they worked out some sort of a thing.
No, but they didn't.
Well,
then why isn't Linda Lee talking about that? They didn't work out some money thing. It's like, okay, not only that, her book is published by Warner Books.
Well, I can't.
But the reality is this, and it's in Matthew Polly's book. Not only did Bruce Lee not write The Warrior before Kung Fu came about, he wrote it afterwards. He wrote it after he had read the Kung Fu script.
Really?
Yes. And he read the Kung Fu script. He tried out for it. They didn't use him because they couldn't understand him when he talked. They
All right.
Ugh.
There's a lot to unpack. I mean, we've all seen Bruce Lee movies. Yes, he has an accent, but you can understand the guy. Okay? I mean, top Hollywood people work with him and understood him. So I mean, where the hell is that coming from?
That's the let's not cast the Asian guy. They can't, they're not, we don't understand them. Can't make any sense of, we can't even make any sense of them. And it goes into the basic studio thing. If that's the case, why isn't there an Asian guy? They couldn't find any other Asian guy that could speak. No, well, we needed someone that could do the martial arts too. And then what? Well, we see him speaking in the Green Hornet. We see him doing that. He's not talking. He's speaking on those things. Yeah, you can say, you can decide. Oh, this one would be better doing the dialogue that they're giving Kane and Kung Fu. Like, come on, this is
So I mean,
classic
so here's
defending.
here's the timeline they're saying Warner Brothers and ABC announced a TV deal for Kung Fu July 1971, right? With a scheduled air date for February 1972. All right. Production started December 15th, 1971, and Bruce had been had auditioned for the part. Okay. Now in December 71, also there was an interview with Bruce Lee on a show called The Pierre Burton Show. You know, I'm just taking some of this off of Wikipedia, where he said that that he had basically come up with a concept called the Warrior, right? You know, he's talking about the Warrior, and basically he said that the original idea of both Warner Brothers and Paramount, I think they wanted me to be a modern type of thing, you know, and the Western type of thing is out. That's what he said. Whereas he wanted to do the Western show, you know, and they basically didn't choose him. They didn't really want to incorporate his idea for the show. And his wife basically puts that forward. So I don't see, you know, these ideas before it shows up. I mean, he's trying to make it seem that, oh, he only came up with it after the deal was announced, after everything was done. But these things we know for shows come up prior to that, you know. So and we know he was pitching a show after the whole Hornet, the Cato show was gone. And I think it would have been a different story once if he did not hit off with the movie, which was Big Boss. He you know, he was trying to do the TV thing, but the movie hit. And he's like, you know what, screw it. You know, I know how it is over here. I'm going to go to it. And he said this before in another place that he decided that the West wasn't really working for him, so the East is where he was going to have to go, right? You know, look, I'm not knocking David Carradine. He did his thing in the '70s. It was a hit. It worked out. You know, the question is whether or not, you know, Bruce Lee had done it. I'm not saying hold this yellow washing or whatever. You know, that's
I'm
that.
saying I'm saying they're
Look,
washing them.
well, look, I'm saying back then, you know, we knew how the industry was at the time, and we're trying to use modern concepts of what's right should have been right. Yeah, but we know how the industry, certain things are going to become. They had a particular audience that they wanted, and that audience they didn't feel was diverse, was not interested or diverse. The advertisers weren't in a more diverse group of people, right? So it only for them it would make perfect sense for Caroline to do it relative to a Bruce Lee, okay, and especially if quote unquote he couldn't understand what he was saying. So like, what the hell, you know?
No, we're not moving from that. We're not moving from 19. We're not moving from that period yet. Hold on. That's if he's gonna say that, we have to prove that they can't understand them.
Look right into the camera lens right here and tell us your name, your age, and where you were born.
My last name is Lee, Bruce Lee. I was born in San Francisco in 1940. I'm 24 right now.
And you worked in motion pictures in Hong Kong?
Yes, since I was around 6 years old.
And when did you leave Hong Kong?
1959, when I was 18.
I see.
Okay,
Now,
he has an
before you
accent.
introduce
Yes.
your talk,
Can we understand
that
them?
baby boy?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Yes, of
That's
course.
all I gotta say.
I mean, so I mean, he was off with the person's name. He's off with the who he said was the one who did it all by himself. He's off with the guy not being able to speak proper English. I don't know what's up with Tarantino. Like I said, I think he's like just regressing on us or whatever. You know, he's been an auteur for so long and celebrated that he thinks that he can call all these shots. And I think he needs to just sit down and take a look. In fact, I don't even know why we're even fighting this. Sharon Lee basically said, "Yo, if you don't know nothing about what's going on, don't be saying nothing." And him coming out against the mother is like, you're going to have different points of view. No one is denying that he may have died in his mistress's bed. No one is denying that.
But why even bring that up?
Exactly. Why? It's like he wants to stick the point, But dude, it's like, it's a messy point. There's a lot of things that happen in different people's lives, But just by him saying that, what does that do? Does it negate that she doesn't know what was going on with the guy? Does it negate that she didn't stay with him and she had 2 children with him? Does it negate that she, come on, let's give me a freaking break.
He's also mudslinging.
Yeah, it's mudslinging. It was like very mean spirited. I think something triggered his anger, or in terms of having to take it on the chin, in terms of the Bruce Lee stuff, and then he goes into his whole like, well, then let's talk about the facts, and now he wants to just get some stuff off his chest about all the conversations I guess he's already had as he was doing his research and people giving their points of view. Now he's going to kind of bring it all up, but it just seemed the energy and the tone was just mean spirited. And obviously Mars already caught him on just like, not necessarily a lie, but like him not even citing the right name. So that just brings a whole bunch of stuff into question in terms of how deeply is he really studying it. And I mean, long story short, like Bruce Lee predicated a whole change in terms of the interest in Asian culture, martial arts, and a whole bunch of stuff. So it's hard for me to believe that this person, Ed Spielman, just where was his inspiration from? Like what just got that on his radar? I don't know. But at some point, they were all working together, and they just put on. And the Warrior happened, thankfully. Good for Shannon and the legacy of the Lee family. But it just gets really messy because in the worst case scenario, he looked at Ed Spielman's script, and he probably, if anything, he didn't get the idea from it. He probably was like, okay, let me try to write a more historically accurate version of this. And that's like the worst case scenario.
I wouldn't. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, we go to that portion of saying he had this thing and it came after. It came afterwards.
Right.
It was something in my mind. It's work. It in Hollywood. This will be the one in a million time where somebody had the someone in the studio who they rarely even approve ideas, and like let's say we have this wacky idea that somehow made it, and then at the same time going to say, well, Bruce's came later, and that's so he saw that and he wrote his thing, and we got how do you got proof of that too? But then it's like you can't even use that because it's like, all right, he he went for the role, and we decided that David Carradine can do better. We can understand him more, and he's going to have an Asian accent. And it's just like the kung fu, where someplace wherever it plays, is not going to be played that regularly. And that's the thing it feels like Quentin Tarantino's struggling with, that there's some show that was a great show, but at the same time it has this glowing, terrible thing that people look at and say, what's the white dude doing with I mean, I don't get too emotional, but I think that's the thing. I think if we go.
Bruce Lee also had an interesting point about the whole shebang, because when they asked him about it, what do you think? He said he thought the industry. He says it in the interview. He says that the studio thought it was too much of a risk to have him doing it, and they were like, well, he says he can't understand because he said he couldn't. This is what Bruce Lee said. He said he couldn't blame them because the situation was reversed, and an American star was to come to Hong Kong, and I was the man with money. I wouldn't have on my own concerns as to whether the acceptance would be there either. So that's what he understood how that business was back then and stuff like that. But
playing the game. He's doing what he's supposed to do. Saying I'm not gonna fault them for this. I would like, hey, I'm here to play the game.
And George Takei actually filed because of they interviewed Asian actors, and we all know George Takei's accent is flawed. There is no accent there. He filed a complaint, basically saying, but eventually a lot of the Asian community decided, what, they were getting secondary roles in the show, and it was great employment for Asian actors. So it's weird. It's, you know, not weird, but it's understandable. You had the same thing with a lot of African American actors just doing roles, you know, secondary roles, just to get work, you know, because it was such work was so scarce. So, you know, again, I just think if you're going to come out with stuff like this, you need to have your facts down pat, right? You know, it doesn't have to be what do you call it, singing insults or, you know, come with your facts. This is what I think happened. And he said he spoke to the guy. This is what the guy said. I mean, I don't know, unless this guy Spielman, his name is Abramson somehow. I don't know how that works out.
I would ask Professor CA in this thing, instead of going through the next 30 or 40 minutes of it, does he also talk about, since Mars brought it up a couple of times, does he talk about Uma Thurman wearing Bruce's outfit?
No.
I mean, that's it.
Or if he did, it wasn't on this podcast. I'm sure he's spoken about that with reverence in the past. I'm sure he's kind of like had to have mentioned that lift.
I don't know, man. We giving him a little. you're
I mean,
betting. You're
it's
betting
so blatant. I mean, the thing is, like, the reason why I give him that is, or I assume that is because Quentin loves to share the lifts that he gets from. I lifted this here. I lifted this here. I'm into this reference here because I'm so esoteric that I would know about these different things, and he likes to pull them out to kind of share like where he got these ideas from and how, you know. So it wouldn't surprise me if in those Kill Bill behind the scenes joints where he had to have talked about it. I would almost put I wouldn't put $50 on it, but I would put 20 on it that he mentioned it somewhere.
Well, let's do a short. I don't have it. I know I'm not sure what this is, but he does talk about the origin of the Kill Bill suit. I'm not sure what's going to be in this video, so
Okay.
not me setting you up to lose. Even though we didn't put it's not a real bet.
Sure, for sure.
We'll do this and then we'll end it here because it's you know.
Did you show the picture I just?
Oh, you sent a picture where on the text?
In chat.
In the chat, okay. Let me stop sharing.
Hey, Emma.
We need a mattress, right?
Yeah.
We're doing a look.
Sorry about that. All right. So maybe this answers everything we need here. All right, you guys seeing it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Classic, bro. Frigging classic. I mean, no one who saw that movie thought that it was just, they knew the comparison right away.
Yeah, for sure. And that's even more reason why I think Quentin had to have talked about it. He wouldn't not talk about it.
But if you're stealing the outfit from Bruce and you're saying this is homage, why are you tearing him down?
Yep.
If everything, say all of the stuff is true, and I just did a movie where all of the branding is Bruce Lee, where Bruce Lee, the thing took off. That thing, people had that in the 80s, like watching the movies.
Yeah, the reason he's doing it now is because it's years later, and he chose to do something not putting Bruce in a fair light, which got Shannon in his ass. So now he's coming at it from that point of view. He's not thinking about how much he owes to Bruce Lee.
Yes. And that what kind of hurts, to be like, all right, we had this thing where he's taking Bruce likeness. Everyone's saying, oh, it's an homage. But then at the same time, it's like, hey, this guy cheated on his wife. He did this stuff. He stole the idea from, well, we're going to go through all the negatives, huh? The negatives that you prove.
Yeah, because what Quentin's doing in that movie is literally revisionist. Like even in terms of the murders, like he rewrote that. He rewrote history. So, yes. But he doesn't admit to it in the sense of like saying, because the easy thing for Quentin to do was to be like, look, the whole movie is an alternate reality.
Yes.
That would have been easy. It's an alternate reality. Obviously, with the Manson family, that's not how it ended. So just kind of take it as like this is alternate reality, and that would have been the safest bet. But Shannon is like, yo, taking as right now with a lot of people coming for different people's legacy. Legacy is like one of the only things people have.
Yes.
So it's like, and that's all around. That's Bruce's legacy. That's also Ed Spielman's, whatever his name is. I'm sorry if I'm saying it incorrectly. What his name was, because he's saying this dude also Ed had to take it on the chin. Either he took it on the chin because he should take it on the chin because he did it, or he didn't. But everybody's fighting for their legacy.
Right, and you're 100% right. Especially, I mean, damn, this controversy has been going on since what 2019 because of the once upon a time
Exactly.
and
So it brought it all back up. Like Quentin brought it all back up.
Exactly. Let it die, bro. Let it frigging die.
You know? And if anything, now that we're hearing all this backstory, for all we know, that was Quentin kind of giving it to the Lees based off of maybe understandings or knowledge from these relationships with Matthew Polly and the original screenwriter Ed. So that he's telling on himself.
Yep. It's like saying, this is why you should like my cheesy characters instead of you should like Cliff Booth, or I call him Cliff Eastwood, or
right.
Beatrice Kiddo, or what was it, Beatrice Kiddo, or Bill. Like,
I mean, I agree with you. Yeah, I mean,
they're not like Bruce without seeing the like from. I think the little bit that I saw as a kid, just looking at the poster and just saying, I want to see this movie, and then maybe seeing a trailer as a kid, but I can't even remember that. But the idea, just like seeing this is that poster and then maybe seeing a couple blips on television, possibly, and then just wanting to see the movie and being like so in awe of that. And that's the thing, when you look at Kill Bill, you're not getting that. And there's no way it's like, hey, we're going to take somebody that got no skills. And this is not even Zoe Bell. Like Zoe Bell, the stunt woman, could have done it, but she's not a name to do it. So it's like, let's take my favorite actress and make her this thing, and it's just all movie making. Now, the other thing is like Bruce is all of what visually works in a movie. This is, Mr. Style, so it's kind of, I don't know. I'm getting too emotional. Sorry, guys, but it's just him taking so much from from Bruce and then trying to tear down Bruce. When it's like if you're doing homage to him and you've stolen or you use so much of his mystique, then why would you tear him down? Why would
because what happens is it's like a cycle. It's like you're born, you're a teenager in fucking Blockbuster or some video rental store watching movies, right? Then you get to make movies, right? And then to make these movies, you need ideas and materials to pull from. So you pull from all these diverse clips, dope. You come with some good movies that are entertaining. Then you get swag. Then you get power, right? And then you forget yourself. And now you're going from being a fan in a movie in a rental store, watching The Big Boss and watching Enter the Dragon. Now you're gonna and because of your platform, now you're gonna use that to tear down the things that got you your platform in the first place. Yeah. It's just this kind of weird cycle of like being humble and respectful until you have power, and now you're just acting out in the kind of the worst ways.
Bro, you are so right. You no, I mean, I give him credit for reading up on the stuff and trying to get more information. I get that. But at the same time, trying to tear him down, bro, it's like, we know he's human. He had faults. I mean, we were discovering this back when we were younger and people talking about drug use and stuff like that. Hey, we understand that the separation from his wife and what he was doing in it. We got that, but it's like, to me, this thing controversy happened when once upon a life in America and in Hollywood happened, and he gets his butt kicked, and people are like, oh, you can't do that to Bruce Lee and stuff like that. But I thought it was just a parody. I didn't think it was like a real thing that people were gonna, go buck wild about. And the daughter responded to it. You know what I'm trying to say? But I've always felt Sharon Lee has been very respectful in the way she responds to some of this stuff. But the way he responds has always been, to me, not as respectful as could be.
Yeah, I think he just forgot himself. It's just like this weird kind of cycle of like, how do you remain humble when your influence grows from another culture? Like Eminem kind of has seemed like for me the best, one of the few best examples of like staying true to the culture. Now, granted, he had his little controversy when he was younger, maybe with like a tape where he said some things that were like, you know, inappropriate. But other than that, like he's been kind of like, look, I'm a guest in this house. He's always constantly reminding us and himself, I'm a guest in this house. And I just think you gotta be a little bit more humble. Just kind of like, yeah. You gotta be a little. And I think it's also this kind of thing where like certain artists, and I've seen this with comedians and different artists, you want to cross this threshold to be able to say the things that are not appropriate. And then they lose it from there. I'm not going to mention anybody. I've mentioned it off camera or whatever who I'm talking about, but it's always like, I want to be the guy to say this. I want to be the one to do this. And it's like, man, just lose that. Just can't be happy with your millions, bro. Like, you know what I mean? And just keep that line in check because it keeps you in check.
And it's interesting that Joe Rogan has not chopped off those clips to say Bruce
exactly
stole kung fu, because even if there was any sort of he could pull up any proof, it's like it doesn't matter. Kung fu, they picked they didn't pick an Asian actor, so it's always going to have it's always going to be an eyesore. You're going to look at that and be like, you know, I mean, Big Daddy Kane has his name from Kane from watching the TV show, but at the same time, you can't really go out and say, I'm going to watch that classic Kane, and someone will be like, well, why don't they got an Asian actor in there? Well, Bruce Lee couldn't speak. When? In 65, 70, isn't he in movies? Yeah, but you know, it's like, no, that's not what it is. That's isn't Marvel going through the same thing when they picked the white person instead of Asian actor? Weren't there other Asian actors in there? Yeah, they were. So why did they not do it? It's like, well, that was a offensive character, but is it? No, it actually wasn't offensive.
We got to be careful there because I mean, some people find it offensive. So
what? Find the ancient one? I'm not even talking about.
I'm talking about like Fu Manchu.
I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about just.
No, but I'm just saying you have to be careful. While you may not find it offensive, that others may. So
no, the same problem they had. The Asian actors were not playing the Asian villains. It was white men. Dr. No, those things, and they got to the point where they're like, "Oh, just give us those roles. You're not giving us any. We're not making any money." And that's the problem.
Well, just give them a regular role. There are regular roles you can give, and it doesn't have to be necessarily.
No, in the history of it, they weren't giving them those roles.
Yeah.
So if you're saying that, and you're saying they got to the point where we'll take the bad guy roles. We'll take them because the same that happened with Native Americans, the black actors, is like just give us those bad guys. So
we know back then it was a different time. Okay, it was a different.
We'll put you like this. At this point, we understand why Joe is not going to promote that stuff, even though he let him say it. He's probably just sitting there like, "Oh shit." So he's not promoting it, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see in the upcoming Joe Rogan podcast, we see Shannon come back on.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
So that's something.
Please.
Of course, this works well for him because the controversy makes people come to listen to the show, which gives him more viewers, which gives more listeners, which gives him more. The advertisers like. So hey, this all plays into Rogan.
So watch Warrior. Watch Warrior.
So guys, we got to wrap it up. So what are we saying, Petey and Cal?
That he has a vendetta against Bruce, and he wants his show Kung Fu to be remembered as a classic show.
Who?
Tarantino. Tarantino wants his classic as a kid, the show that he liked, to be respected. Because that's his angle. Why are we talking about Kung Fu? Like, he's talking about his thing. What is Kung Fu like? What does he have to defend? He's like, well,
he's throwing mud. He's throwing mud.
Yeah. He didn't have to spend all this time to try to do the reveal of Kung Fu. Like, did anyone watch a documentary on how Kung Fu was actually real? All of the bits were actually by this white guy actually wrote this idea, and we decided Bruce Lee couldn't speak. That documentary is not happening.
Yep, and he said that it was an excellent depiction of Buddhist culture. I hope somebody follows up on that. Yo,
all right, guys, gotta rock.
Subscribe.
Spin right.